Hello, Ekadhik recaps here. Today, I'll be discussing a movie based on a true story called Picnic in Hanging Rock. It's set in the year 1900, marking the final Valentine's Day of the 19th century for a girls' college near Melbourne. As morning breaks, the girls, deprived of male attention, exchange Valentine's Day wishes amongst themselves. Sarah, like the other students, has prepared a Valentine card with her own composed poems to express her affection for Miranda, a tall and slender blonde who has captivated Sarah's attention for quite some time. However, on this day, Miranda asks Sarah not to dwell on their connection and to focus on her studies instead, as her time at the college will soon come to an end. Mrs. Appleyard, the strict headmistress, keeps a watchful eye over the students, ensuring they adhere to the strict code of decorum dictated by the Victorian era. After squeezing into corsets and donning elegant dresses and pristine white gloves, the female students gather in the yard to greet their teachers. An opportune moment arrives when Mrs. Appleyard grants the students permission to embark on a picnic to Hanging Rock, a magnificent geological wonder standing 500 feet tall, formed from volcanic rocks. Accompanying the girls on the excursion are Mademoiselle Poitier, a gentle and kind French teacher who instructs them in dances, and Miss McGraw, a stern math teacher. Sarah yearns to join the group, hoping to be close to Miranda, but Mrs. Appleyard forbids her from attending the picnic. The orphaned girl is compelled to remain at the college to memorize a poem by the best poetess of that era. Sarah is discontented with this decision as she finds Felicia's work to be foreign to her own taste. She has written her own verse, which she considers more captivating and refined. Upon learning of Sarah's personal composition, Mrs. Appleyard openly expresses her disapproval and demands that Sarah memorizes the designated writer's verse. On their way to Hanging Rock, the schoolgirls engage in lively discussions about their upcoming vacation while basking in the warmth of the sun. Once they have distanced themselves from the school premises, they remove their pristine white gloves and revel in the attention they receive from children in the nearby village. Miss McGraw, who possesses extensive knowledge about the Rocky Ledge's geological history, shares the story of its formation, dating back millions of years. She also warns the girls about the potential dangers lurking in the area, including ants and venomous snakes. To avoid any complications, the schoolgirls are strictly prohibited from climbing the rock or scaling its ledges, as it would result in an abrupt end to their picnic. Upon reaching their destination, the schoolgirls settle on the slope of Hanging Rock, indulging in a heart-shaped birthday cake while basking in the southern sunbeams. They relax amidst the blooming vegetation, with some reciting Shakespeare's sonnets and Madame Poitier admiring reproductions of Botticelli's artwork, drawing comparisons between Miranda and an angel depicted in one of the paintings. The coachman, Ben Hussey, diligently keeps track of the time as instructed by the school's headmistress, who mandated their return by 8 in the evening. At precisely noon, a gentleman notices that his wristwatch has stopped, prompting Miss McGraw to check hers. To her surprise, she discovers that her watch has also stopped at exactly 12 o'clock. Though not attaching significant importance to this occurrence, the teacher attributes it to the influence of natural magnetism. At some point, a few girls grow restless and decide to venture away from the watchful eyes of their teachers. Seeking permission from Mademoiselle Poitier, Miranda, Irma, and Marion ask for leave to explore the other side of the rock and take measurements. The unsuspecting woman remains unaware that this is merely an excuse and allows the girls to depart. They are followed by Edith, a plump, dim-witted, and unattractive girl who is a few years younger than the others. The girls promptly caution her not to complain, and Edith agrees to their terms. Not far away, they catch the attention of two young men, Albert, the coachman in the service of Colonel Figerbert, and the military nephew. While Uncle Michael and his wife doze nearby after an afternoon snack, Albert observes Miranda with fascination, captivated by her slender figure and charming smile. However, Albert does not share the gentleman's enthusiasm, as he believes that all girls in relationships are essentially the same, lacking genuine substance beneath their beautiful exterior. On the contrary, Michael holds the opposite belief, convinced that there is more to girls like Miranda. Driven by love at first sight, Michael pursues the girls as they ascend further. From their elevated position, the schoolgirls observe the motionless Colonel Figerbert and his wife, appearing like ants from their vantage point. The girls marvel at the multitude of people in the world who hold such prominence. Marion suggests that everyone in life has a purpose, though not everyone comprehends their own role. As they continue to climb, the schoolgirls are captivated by Hanging Rock and its peculiar labyrinthine formations, leading them ever higher. At one point, Edith, feeling fatigued, decides to rest for a while. The other students grow weary of her incessant whining and pay no attention, enjoying the beauty of their surroundings instead. After dozing off briefly, Edith wakes up and notices something peculiar happening with the other girls. For some reason, they have removed their shoes and stockings, continuing to ascend barefoot. Fearing being left alone, Edith hesitantly follows Miranda, Irma, and Marion onto the next ledge of the rock. There, the girls press their bodies against the rock, as if seeking unity with nature. Despite pushing forward, Edith eventually succumbs to sudden fatigue and refuses to proceed any further. It is at that moment that Miranda utters the cryptic phrase, "Everything begins and ends at the right time." The girls lay down to rest and quickly fall asleep. Within minutes, they awake and resume their journey, disappearing into a crevice in the rock. Edith calls out to Miranda and the others to stop, but it seems as though they cannot hear her. Startled by something, Edith lets out a wild scream and hurries back down to the foot of the cliff. Meanwhile, Mrs. Appleyard, the headmistress, anxiously awaits the return of the schoolgirls, realizing that it is already 8 o'clock and they have not yet returned from the picnic. She summons the maid to prepare a cup of coffee, her self-assured and domineering demeanor giving way to nerves and fear as she senses that something has gone awry. Hours later, under the cover of night, a wagon carrying the girls arrives at the school's premises. Mrs. Appleyard hurries outside to meet the group and inquire about the cause of their delay. A tearful Mademoiselle Poitier reports that during the picnic, 3 girls and Miss McGraw have vanished without a trace. The headmistress is left in a state of shock. Meanwhile, the coachman shares further details of the incident. In the afternoon, he, Mademoiselle Poitier, and the schoolgirls have dozed off, unaware of how Miss McGraw and 3 girls could have disappeared. The next morning, the police and villagers embark on a search for the missing schoolgirls at Hanging Rock. Despite thoroughly scouring the area, the girls and their teacher are nowhere to be found. Local law enforcement suspects the involvement of an unknown individual who may have either abducted the girls or taken advantage of their vulnerability. Mademoiselle Poitier and other teachers attempt to speak with Edith in order to gather information about what transpired on the rock, but the girl remains silent. A doctor examines the returned schoolgirl, Edith, and confirms that she is physically unharmed except for minor scratches on her hands from thorny bushes. Mrs. Appleyard realizes that such an incident could tarnish the reputation of her educational institution and makes every effort to locate the missing girls. The police continue their investigation, meticulously combing through Hanging Rock, but their efforts prove futile. During the interrogation of the colonel's nephew, the surgeon notices inconsistencies in his testimony. Initially, the nephew hides the fact that he followed the girls, but later reveals that he encountered Miss McGraw, who had ascended after the 3 schoolgirls, and was surprised to find her wearing only pantaloons instead of a skirt. The impropriety of her attire shocks him, as it does not align with his perception of her upbringing. A couple of days later, the police return to the school to collect the girls' belongings. Dogs are employed to track the girls' scent, and locals search the bottom of the lake, yet all efforts prove fruitless. Meanwhile, the surgeon visits Michael again and attempts to implicate him in the disappearance, only to realize that he is not involved. While others begin losing hope, Michael remains determined and invites Albert to accompany him on another search of Hanging Rock. Initially reluctant, as he is in the service of Michael's uncle, Albert eventually agrees to the journey. They climb Hanging Rock, surveying the area from dawn until dusk, but their efforts yield no results. Albert suggests they return, but Michael insists on staying the night, vowing to continue the search. As morning breaks, Michael continues his ascent, leaving behind pieces of white cloth to mark his path. Upon reaching the summit at precisely noon, Michael succumbs to the same inexplicable fatigue experienced by the schoolgirls. Exhausted, he collapses but refuses to surrender hope, crawling along Hanging Rock. Meanwhile, Albert arrives and realizes Michael is no longer there. Spotting a piece of white cloth, Albert follows its trail and discovers a weakened Michael with a head injury. Soon after, a doctor and policeman arrive to attend to Michael and transport him away. As Albert prepares to depart, he notices Michael's clenched fist and opens it, finding a fragment of one of the girl's dresses. Alarmed, Albert rushes back to the rock, where he encounters an exhausted Irma. He calls for a wagon to return and bring the girl to the Figure household. Michael keeps a watchful eye on Irma, and their bond gradually strengthens. Back in the village, everyone at the school rejoices upon hearing that the girl has been found, except for the headmistress, who is disheartened by the news. She believes the disappearance of the schoolgirls would have been preferable, as it casts a shadow over the reputation of the educational institution. The police and doctor examine Irma, surprised to find no marks on her body in her overall good health. However, Irma herself has no recollection of what transpired and is unable to assist the investigation in any way. Mrs. Appleyard becomes increasingly anxious as the situation unfolds. Throughout the day, she deals with reporters, and in the evening, she drowns her sorrows in wine, contemplating how to salvage the school. The disappearance of several girls raises concerns among the parents of other students, leading many to withdraw their children from the institution. Financial difficulties also prompt the teachers to consider leaving. After careful deliberation, Mrs. Appleyard decides to expel the schoolgirls whose parents have not paid their tuition. Unfortunately, Sarah becomes a victim of this decision, as her guardian has been unresponsive to the headmistress's letters for months. Sarah suffers greatly due to the absence of Miranda, and this news only intensifies her anguish. Her only source of hope lies in memories of her brother, Albert, with whom she lived in an orphanage. The following morning, Albert shares with Michael a dream he had in which his sister, Sarah, came to bid him farewell. He vividly recalls the scent of her favorite flowers, and it felt as if the encounter was real. Meanwhile, Mrs. Appleyard informs Mademoiselle Poitier that Sarah's guardian has come to retrieve her from the school, eliminating the need to wait for her any longer. Throughout the day, all the students leave the school, leaving only the teachers behind. Mrs. Appleyard and Mademoiselle Poitier engage in conversation, reminiscing about their youth and discussing the headmistress's past life with her ex-husband. The next morning, the doctor strolls through the schoolyard and notices that the fence of the greenhouse has been damaged. Upon investigation, he discovers the broken ceiling and finds Sarah's lifeless body. It appears that Sarah took her own life due to her longing for Miranda and her unwillingness to return to the orphanage. Whether Mrs. Appleyard played a role in her demise, such as pushing her out of the window, remains unclear, but suspicion lingers, especially as Mrs. Appleyard is already dressed in black attire and appears to have foreknowledge. On March 27, the body of the headmistress is discovered at Hanging Rock, suggesting that she may have attempted to climb it. The fate of the missing girls remains a mystery, as their bodies were never found. To this day, their disappearance remains an enigma. And with that, the movie concludes. Thank you for watching.